Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Hey, we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to WBHM-DB, Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson, your host of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. My guest tonight is Lionel Friedberg, an Emmy Award-winning film and TV producer, and also a writer. He grew up in South Africa and began his career at the first television station in Central Africa. It was in Northern Rhodesia, now Zambia. He worked as a director of photography on 18 feature films and wrote, produced, and directed for National Geographic, PBS, and national broadcasting cable networks including the Discovery Channel, A&E, and the History Channel. He is also a New York Times best-selling author. I have enjoyed so much getting a chance to read his new book. I think that you will love it too. The book is titled Forever in My Veins, How Film Led Me to the Mysterious World of the African Shaman. Lionel, I am so glad you're here. I cannot wait to talk about your book. He's pretty nifty. Lionel, I am so excited that you're here. I am so impressed with your work. You have been in the film industry for, 50 years, over 50 years.
Yeah, I'm an old guy now. I'm in my late 70s. So I've been in the film industry for over 60 years. And, we were talking earlier, you were saying that, you feel very lucky to be doing what you do. And I have to reiterate that I feel extremely blessed and very fortunate to have had an amazing life. And, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I just wanted to share some of those experiences with folks out there, because not many people get the opportunities to do what I've had. And I'm not sure why and how all of those opportunities came about, but they did. And some of them were quite extraordinary, quite amazing, really. And they've expanded my vision of the universe, of the cosmos, of the world we live in, of each other. And it's been an amazing journey. So I wanted to share that with folks, which is why I wrote Forever in My Veins. And we can get into specifics, if you like, as to some of the things that I cover in the book.
Well, I would like that, but I'm interested in learning about the shaman who prophesied about your life experiences, down to and including when you started having the swelling issues and stuff. I mean, she was very dead on with everything that she told you. And I had a question for you also. The word Nganga, how do I pronounce that?
Well, in Zambia, which is where this event took place, which is in Central Africa, shamans go by the name of Nganga. So she was a Nganga. However, most of the shamans that I refer to later on in the book, the ones I've had most of my experiences with in South Africa, they go by the name of Sangoma. And Sangoma basically means a diviner, a herbalist, a traditional doctor, someone who can see into the future, someone who communicates with your ancestors, is able to diagnose illnesses. They do all these amazing things. And a Sangoma wears many hats and has many capabilities, some of which are absolutely astounding. And, I talk about some of the stuff in the latter chapters. But you asked me about this old lady, the first one that I met, which is basically the glue, if you like, that holds my whole story in the book together. And let me just take folks back a little bit, to put everything into context. I was born and I grew up in South Africa. I went to school there. I completed my education there. Apartheid was alive and well. And for people who may know anything about apartheid, it was a system whereby there was a very strict racial divide in society. Separate entrances, separate beaches, separate churches, separate banks, separate everything for black and white folks. The country was cut right down the middle. And, the twain never met. You couldn't, the one side of society really knew very little about the other side. And that pertained more to the whites than the blacks. The blacks were servants and they worked in, white households and factories and farms and whatever else. But the white folks really knew nothing about their black neighbors. And the black people, of course, were by far the majority of the population. And it was kind of sad that we didn't know anything about their history or their culture or what made them tick and who they were and where they came from. That wasn't taught in white schools. And so this is the world I grew up in. And it was kind of difficult, particularly after I finished high school. I thought, what am I going to do with my life? I was unhappy about that situation because I'd often seen black folks who were stopped by police in the streets just for no reason, other than to be asked to show whether they had permission to be where they were. Every one of them had to carry a document stating why they were in a certain area, a white town or a city or a rural area or whatever it was. They had to have permission there, and this had to be renewed regularly. And if this was not up to date, if their papers or their passbook, as it was called, was not up to date, they would face imprisonment. And eventually, if they weren't bailed out by their employer, they would be sent back to their tribal areas, which were way back in the boondocks, in the rural areas, far away from the gold mines in the cities. And I'd seen that many, many times, and it disturbed me. So anyway, when I finished my education, I was an only child. My parents decided to leave the country because my father took a job to manage a small store in a country way up to the north of South Africa, a place that was called Northern Rhodesia. Now, Northern Rhodesia is today known as the Republic of Zambia. And just to put things into context, for people to know what I'm talking about, it sits right at the southern end of the Congo Basin. So, it's way up there in the middle of those days, what we used to refer to as darkest Africa. Well, today it's not as dark as it used to be because most of it has been explored, most of it's been settled, and there are cities everywhere now. But that's where Zambia is. But those days it was Northern Rhodesia. And my father went up to run a small store in a town that was part of a copper mining area. So there were a whole bunch of these little towns, in a string of them, where there were copper mines, and he went up there to run a store. He by trade, he was a watchmaker in the days when watches and clocks used to have mechanical, mechanisms, unlike today where most of it is electronic. And so he went up there, and I have to tell you that I fell in love with the movies when I was a little tiny tyke, because my mother used to drag me to every movie that she saw. I used to go to matinees with her on Saturday and sometimes on a Wednesday afternoon, and I fell in love with the movies, and all I wanted to do with my life was to make movies. So when they moved up to Northern Rhodesia, I'm finished high school now, I'm talking about the year 1960, I said, I'm going with you. And my mother said, go to university, get yourself a degree, go and get a career. And I said, no, I want to go with you up there because that's exciting. That's darkest Africa. And I had my own little movie camera that I had already been using to make movies for my school sporting events and my friends' birthday parties and whatever else. And I thought,
it's a very nice one.
Here's the chance for me to go up and make my own version of Tarzan and the African Queen and King Solomon's Mines and all those wonderful adventure films that I'd seen as a kid in the early 50s. I thought, now's my chance to do that. But I mean, what did I know? I was a teenager and I didn't know too much about that, but I had a movie camera and I thought, well, I was going to find a career. Well, that was fanciful thinking. It reminds me of so many people who've, come to Hollywood with a dream and left with their tail between their legs, because it doesn't work out that way. It's not so easy. And I kind of had that same attitude. Who on earth was going to give me the opportunity to make movies in the African bush? Because that's virtually where I was going. So when I got up there and I discovered that all that there was were a bunch of copper mining mines and endless jungles and bush spread out from horizon to horizon on either side. What on earth was I going to do with my life? But I had my movie camera. Anyway, to cut a long story short, one day in the local newspaper, there was a little local rag that served these copper mining towns. It was called the Northern News. And in there was an ad that announced that a television station was going to be built and was going to go into operation in 1961, and that they were looking for staff. And I thought, oh my word, somebody's been hearing my prayers. That's what I need to do. Anyway, the station was still being built, but I went and knocked on the door and I spoke to the guy who was recruiting staff. Now, most of the people who were going to run this station either came from the UK, from England, or from other countries, overseas, the key staff, the producers and the engineers and the directors and whatever else. But they were looking for staff for menial tasks, menial jobs, if you like, a driver, someone to run the props department and things like that. And I said, I'll do anything. I'll sweep the floors, whatever it is. You've got to give me a job. I've got to do this. And I was eventually given employment. And I got a job at the station before it even went on the air. I helped them, weld cables and, do things like that to get everything ready. And in December 1961, we officially went on the air. And it was the first television station in Central Africa. And there I was working for them in the props department, taking care of props for sets and things of that nature. But I was very, very impatient to get behind a camera. And one day I said to the manager, I said, look, you got to put me behind a camera or I'm leaving. And he said, all right, well, we'll try you out. And they did. And because I'd had so much experience as an amateur filmmaker, and I'd made some pretty good little amateur films, I can tell you, without sounding boastful or arrogant about it, I was pretty good behind that camera. And he said, yeah, okay. The manager said, yeah, all right, well, you can be one of our studio cameramen. And that's really how my career began. Now, I was as happy as can be. It was absolutely wonderful. We had all kinds of programming that was coming out of the station. In the morning were educational broadcasts for local, mainly African schools, for local kids out in the boondocks where there was a shortage of teachers. You know, some of these schools were way out in the bush, far away from towns. And so they all had one television set in the main hall of the school, and kids would go there for some of their lessons, and it was coming from our station. And in the afternoons, we would have tribal programming for villages all around the area of tribal music and dance. So we'd had educational broadcasts in the morning, all in local languages, some of it in English, but not all of it. And then we'd have these amazing local tribal programs in the afternoon with drumming and beating and dancing. And then at night, we'd have Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy and Bonanza for the white viewers. And, you know, so I lived in this, it was like a surreal world. We lived in many cultures.
It's like a dual multicultural world. Now, we have to break. We have to stop for a break right quick, but we will be right back. And I hope all of our listeners come too. And if you didn't mute the game, shame on you. You're missing this great show. But if you're listening after, I hope that you are just cheering on the Saints. We'll be right back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate Magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the world wide web of weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio, and my guest tonight is Lionel Friedberg. Oh, Lionel, I'm sorry. And I'm going to tell you that I am really impressed with this man. His publicist, who is a friend of mine, and I'm going to share this, Lionel, because I think it's lovely, but it says, Lionel is the man who brought us television shows such as Ancient Mysteries, Mysteries of the Bible, and History Mysteries for the Discovery Channel, History Channel, and National Geographic. His latest incredible book, which it is, brings us on an adventure of shamanism, near-death experience, interviews with the dead, UFO encounters photographed, and strange paranormal encounters during his world travels as a Hollywood filmmaker. And Lionel, I know that I interrupted you in mid-stride, but I do want to note that you have traveled and worked on all 7 continents. You have been everywhere.
I've been to all 7 continents of the planet, yeah. And remember, there are 7 continents, because if you exclude Antarctica, it's 6 continents. But if you include Antarctica, it's 7. And I've been there too. So, so let me just pick up. So after 3 years, the country, this Northern Rhodesia, gets its independence from Britain and becomes the Republic of Zambia. Now, the local people, correctly so, are now in charge of their affairs. And what they did was the government decided to nationalize the station, which was originally privately owned. And the minute that happened, we, all us white folk in the station, in the studio, we got little white pink slips to say, thank you very much, you've done a great job, but bye-bye. In 6 months, out of here. Your jobs are going to be taken over by local people. Well, we couldn't argue with that because it made absolute sense, but it was a little horrifying because I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And we had a guy working for us at home. We all had servants still in those days. He was a young guy, not very much older than I was. I was about 22 at this point. And I told him about it. And he said, we have to find out what you should do with your life. Because I told him, I don't want to go back to South Africa, even though South Africa had a really good film industry, even then. But I didn't want to particularly go back to South Africa. Apartheid was still alive and well, and that was the rule of the land. I didn't want to do that. I wanted eventually to end up in Hollywood, which is where I now live, thank goodness, and I eventually got here. But at that time, what do I do? So he said, I will take you to somebody who will tell you what to do. And I had no idea who this somebody was, but I trusted him implicitly. And he said, on Thursday afternoon, we take your car and I will take you to this person. So we did on that Thursday afternoon. There we are driving my little second-hand used car. It was a VW Beetle. It was blue in color. And we went driving into the bush on a little dirt road. And we went to a settlement. And there was a single little tiny house on the edge of the settlement. And David went and knocked at the door. And this little old lady, this little old Bemba woman, she was a member of the Bemba ethnic group. She answered the door, and it was a hot, hot day, but she was covered in a trench coat and a rug, and she beckoned us into her little house. And the minute I went to this house, there were strange smells. There was a very, very weird ambience that wasn't disturbing, but it wasn't familiar to me. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but the vibe inside that place was very, very strange and unfamiliar to me. And we sat down on the floor, and there was a grass mat. She spoke no English, but David, this guy who took me there, our servant, he translated for me. And what she did was she had a little bag of little African animal skin bag, which she picked up and she shook it and she handed it to me and she told me, speak your name into the bag, which she spoke in Bemba. David told me what to do, which I did. And then she sprinkled some snuff into it, which is ground up tobacco leaf. And then she poured the bones onto this grass mat. And the way the bones fell, it made a pattern. And she leaned over and she looked at those bones and she basically foresaw everything in my life. And everything that she told me that day came true over the period of the next 6 decades. It was unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. It's so neat.
To the degree of, how many kids I would have, how many grandchildren I would have, all kinds of stuff. She was that accurate. So I don't know how much time you have before you have your next break, but I want to go on.
About 10 minutes.
I want to give you an example of some of the things she told me. And I didn't understand any of it, but I made notes, and I made mental notes as well as physical notes in a little notepad. But, she said to me things like, one day you will go to a world where there is no color. It's only white. No colors there at all, just a white world. You will go there. And she said, you will one day go far over the big water, and you will go to a place where there are many, many lights, and you will work with many, many famous people. And she said, one day you will be in the bush and you will almost get killed by a great beast. None of this stuff was making any sense to me, as you can well imagine. And I don't think it was making any sense to her either. But these are the images, these are the scenes that she was seeing in this pattern of bones lying on the floor.
So she was just looking at the bones to bring that to you.
Yeah, and she was just describing these visions that she was having. And she said to me even weird things like, for example, one day the big water will almost kill you. And the weirdest thing that she said to me, which I think is one of the most extraordinary stories, is she said to me, again, through the translator, through David, she said, you will meet a man one day who was very, very close to the most evil man who ever lived.
That fascinated me.
And when she said that, I kind of got a little nervous and very edgy because I had no idea what she was inferring. What on earth was she referring to? I had no idea. But as I explain in the book, all of these things did come to pass. Every single thing that she told me came true. You will cross the big water. You will go to the north. You will work in the big lights. Yes, I immigrated from South Africa. I went by sea. She didn't even know what the ocean was. She'd never seen an ocean, this little old lady living in the bush. She was referring to the ocean.
Oh, that's true. I missed that. Wow.
Yeah. She was referring to the ocean, and I did go to the north because I went all the way from Cape Town all the way to the Northern Hemisphere. And where did I end up? Well, my life ended up eventually in Hollywood. And what are the big lights? Well, these are the sound stages of Hollywood. Yeah, lots of lights and lots of famous people. Well, that's what I've done. And, the thing about the white world is that 1991, as part of a science series that I did for PBS, I was sent on a scientific research trip to Antarctica. And it was quite amazing because it was the southern hemisphere in summertime. The sun doesn't set down in the Antarctic because, the sun never goes beneath the horizon. And it was Christmas Eve, 1991, and we on this icebreaker in the middle of an ocean that is covered with pack ice. So there's white everywhere. And the sky was white, and the world was white, and the sea was white, and everything was white. And I was sitting on the deck of the ship, just thinking about it, making my notes of the filming that we'd done that day. And it suddenly hit me again. My God, this is what this woman foresaw. You will go to a world where there is only white, no color. She had foreseen that. And let's talk about the one that I found most strange, about this you will meet a man who was close to the most evil man who ever lived. Well, back in 1983, I did a really terrific series of documentaries on the history of South African Airways, which is one of the oldest airlines in the world and one of the world's great airlines. It flew all over the world from South Africa. It was originally formed in 1929, a private airline, and it was called Union Airways at the time, but it ran out of money. And in 1934, the government, had to bail it out, and it was renamed South African Airways. And in 1983, it celebrated its 50th anniversary. And in the course of our research into the history of the airline, we had found that in 1934, the airline had ordered a bunch of brand new aircraft from a company in Germany. And the company in Germany was called the Junkers Airplane Company. I think they were based in Bremen, if I remember correctly. Now, this is the early 30s. How do you fly an airliner, even though it only sat 14 people? It was still a big airplane. How do you fly something like that all the way from Europe, all the way down Africa to Johannesburg? There are no airfields. There are no weather forecasting stations along the way. There's no radio. How do you do that? And how do you refuel the aircraft en route? All of this had to be pre-planned and done. The trip took 2 weeks for these delivery flights to take place. So that in itself was a major adventure. And what we found as we did our research was that one of the pilots on one of these delivery flights was still alive. And I said, oh, wow, we got to interview this guy. And it turned out that he was retired. He was in his late 80s, almost 90, and he was living in a little tiny village near Munich in Bavaria in Germany. But not only that, we had found out that he had shot a home movie himself of that delivery flight. And I said, we've got to find that footage.
No doubt.
Use it, So we found out that a copy of his film was in a lab in Frankfurt. And so, can you imagine my excitement? when we eventually got to Germany and did finished our filming, doing various other things in Germany, we eventually ended up in Frankfurt. We find the film, we select up the parts that we want to use in our documentary, and from Frankfurt to Munich is quite a distance, but you can drive there non-stop on those amazing German autobahns, which we did. It took a day to get there. And along the way, there were two vehicles with the crew and the publicity crew and whatever else. And there was a man from the German government who was going to be my translator and who was facilitating this interview with this guy. And, they were being very nice and very helpful to us. So we eventually get to the little village where this man lives. And it was the night before the interview was scheduled to take place. And we're all staying in this very nice little hotel. And this guy from the government, the German government, the Foreign Office, he came up to me at about, we had a very good dinner together, and then a lot of wine flowed, and we had a good time that night. And, in the middle of like maybe midnight, he said to me, how much do you really know about this man that you're going to interview tomorrow? Now, I knew his name. His name was Hans Baur, B-A-U-R. He said, but, how much do you really know about him? And I said, well, the only thing I'm interested in is about that amazing delivery flight of those brand new airliners that were flown down Africa. That's what I want to talk to him about. And he said, yeah, but, there was a history behind him. And I said, well, I'm sure there was, and why? And he leaned over to me and he said, do you realize that he was Adolf Hitler's personal pilot? Well, you can imagine.
Astounding. When
I heard that, I instantly sobered up after all of this great German wine. And I thought, oh, my word, how am I going to deal with that? How many times do you get an opportunity to meet someone like that? I've interviewed and met tons of people all over the world in my time. But that guy, I really felt nervous before that interview because I wasn't sure how I was going to handle it. Anyway, the next day came. And we met.
That would be the one.
Well, you can imagine Adolf Hitler was one of the greatest mass murderers in history. Yes, he was. More so than Genghis Khan could ever be, responsible for the death of millions of people.
Yes.
And now I'm going to meet a man who was his personal pilot, who must have known him extremely well. They must have had some degree of, relationship, friendship. What am I going to, how do you do that? Anyway, the next day we go to his house and, we meet him after a while. And the minute I shook his hand, I suddenly realized I was one handshake away from Adolf Hitler. How many times did Adolf Hitler shake that very hand that I have just shaken now? It sort of sobered me up, and it really made me aware of the fact that, wow, talk about 6 degrees of separation. This is 1 degree of separation,
Yes, that is so. When you place it in that context, it takes a whole different persona.
Absolutely, yeah. So not only did we do this interview with him, but at the end of the interview, he invited me to sit down with him, and he started showing me all his photograph albums. And in these albums were endless pictures of him with Adolf Hitler. First of all, he and Adolf Hitler were friends from way, way back. When he got married his first wife, this was his third wife that was living with him at the time. When he married his first wife, Adolf Hitler gave him his wedding party in Adolf Hitler's personal apartment in Munich. So they were close buddies right from very, very early days. And during the course of, going through these albums, he told me that he and Hitler were extremely close during the war. Hitler trusted nobody. He always felt that his life was in danger. He always felt that the people were after him. And there were many attempts on his life, as we now know. But he and Hans Baur were always the best of friends. And he always made place at his dinner table, even if it was a state dinner with someone like Mussolini or whoever. He always made space for Hans Baur to be there as well. That's how tight these two guys were. He was with Hitler the night Hitler was in the bunker, the night Hitler took his life in Berlin. And it was just an amazing afternoon to hear this firsthand from a guy who experienced that. And you know what? It was only after we were driving away from his little house, which is like a picture book house. There he was standing outside his house with his wife, 2 little old people waving goodbye, like an old couple waving goodbye to their grandchildren. And they was as sweet as can be to us. It suddenly struck me again, that's what that old woman in that hut in Africa had seen decades earlier. I will meet the man who knew the most evil man who ever lived. Once again, she was right.
Well, I tell you what, the things that I have already read that she was right about are just phenomenal. But we do have to take a break. We will be right back. Y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am just loving this conversation. And I just think, I always tell people, one of these days, somebody is going to start recording the breaks between, during the shows, and it's not going to be me to share them, but it is so cool because you get even more information that way. I love when I get to talk to someone who has done all the things that I find fascinating. What I really found interesting is this did not come from Gavin, your publicist. This is from you, but life and your career have taught you that the planet, its history, indeed the universe, is far weirder and infinitely more complex, surprising, and amazing than we can ever imagine.
Absolutely.
I think that's my favorite quote from you so far.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it. In fact, at the end of the book, if folks get to the end, and I'm not giving anything away because I'm not, it's not like a plot, but at the very end of the book, I basically say that, we're all connected, every single one of us. We're all connected, whether we are a person or a pony or a petunia. It doesn't matter. We are all connected by some kind of invisible grid on a cosmic scale. We all share a connection with one another. We're all interlinked in some weird, unbelievably complex and amazingly exciting force field, if you like. George Lucas got it right in Star Wars, use the Force, Luke, use the Force. There is the Force. There is such a thing.
Yes.
There really, really is. And I've met so many people who have had experience, who've been clinically dead and who've actually traveled outside their bodies.
Yes. I love this.
People who have had, I work. There's a remarkable institute in Virginia called the Monroe Institute. I don't know how many folks have heard about it, but basically what they do there is raise your level of consciousness, and that's what it's all about. We all need to raise our level of consciousness above the everyday, just above the gray everyday world that we live in. It's more than just getting through the day. Keep your mind alive and try and extend it to a realm, however many realms you believe exist. Go there, try and find them. And at the Monroe Institute, they have the capability of doing this by stimulating consciousness through sound waves. And they have had some of the most fascinating people go there, basically to unwind or to learn to relax or to just, extend their level of consciousness. And there was a rocket scientist, a guy from NASA, who went there, and I interviewed him, and he said, I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I don't believe in any airy-fairy, ooga booga things that go bump in the night stuff. I've got to have proof of everything. And I've had it right here in this institute during my experiences. When I have raised my consciousness with these binaural sound signals that people are able to experience there, I have traveled beyond my body. I've gone outside my body. I have gone outside of the solar system. I have gone beyond to the furthermost reaches of the universe. And I've met my grandfather, and and I said to him, how do you know you met your grandfather? And he said, well, I talked to my dad about it. I said, I described this guy, and this is what he looked like. And my dad said, yeah, that was my dad. That was my dad, So
That's wild.
I'm not throwing all this stuff out because people have said so. I don't go on hearsay. I will only quote people because I'm a documentary filmmaker. You've got to have facts. You've got to have proof. You've got to substantiate things, and you've got to also rationalize it in a way that makes it acceptable to people, because you are offering them tangible proof that these things really do exist. And it doesn't matter what the subject is. That's what you have to do. And this guy was a typical example of that, that he had met his ancestors in astral travel there. But I've met other people who've done this. We can all, maybe even when we're dreaming, we are able to connect to this field. And I think that is the case, because in my own case, I know that I have gone places that I cannot explain, but they certainly are not in this world or of this world. I've met people who have died clinically and floated above their bodies and looked down and seeing surgery being performed on them that have brought them back to life again, and described everything that happened because they went outside their body and they eventually were given a choice by either a light being or a voice or a something or a someone or a it, whatever it was, to give them the option of going back into their bodies and being resuscitated and being brought back to life again as the person who they were in their physical being, in their physical bodies. There was an amazing woman in Atlanta who told me her story. She had an aneurysm on the brain. She traveled outside her body because they had to stop her heart. They had to stop her blood flow in order to open her skull and get rid of the aneurysm. And then they brought her back to life again. And she described the entire surgery to the surgeon afterwards. And he didn't believe a word of it until she said, yeah. And then she described things that he did. She even said, and what about that time when you asked the nurse for a certain instrument and she dropped it and you scolded her? He said, you saw that? She said, of course I did. Why were you so nasty to her? And she was dead when that happened.
Oh, my word. Well, I am fortunate enough to have gotten a chance to speak with Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience. And it's amazing how universal the experiences seem to be. There's not a lot of variation.
Exactly.
At all. And so that's why it almost makes it conclusive.
Well, Kat, how much time you got? You got enough for me to tell you a little story?
You got about 8 minutes.
Okay. The most amazing thing about all of these people that I interviewed in a show that I called Beyond Death. This was about 1998, and I don't remember the channel I made it for. It was for here. It was for either A&E or the History Channel, one of those. It was called Beyond Death, and and the brief was, go and find out what happens to human consciousness, or the spirit, if you like, after the demise of the physical body. In other words, what happens to your soul and all your thoughts and everything that defines who you are when your body's dead. That was what the show was about. So I went to all these institutions and whatever else. But one of the most amazing things during the course of the making of that series was meeting a pediatrician who dealt with children. He was based in Seattle. I think he's still in practice in Seattle. And he dealt with children, small children, and I'm talking about kids at the age of about 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe 8, who were clinically dead and revived, brought back to life again. None of these kids knew each other, but this guy collected a file on all of these kids because people knew about him and would refer their patients or their experiences to him. And he made a collection of all of these kids' experiences. And I interviewed 3 of these kids. And he said all of these children had similar experiences when they were dead. They would say things like, oh, yeah, I went to sleep and then there was this tunnel, and this tunnel was very bright. It was a tunnel of like light. And at the end, there was this big, bright room, and I could go in there. And then some of the kids called them angels. Some of them called them doctors in white coats. Some of the kids said, yeah, there was Jesus there, and there were other people with him. Some of them said, oh, no, there were scientists, but they all described these figures in this rather large space. And they were given an option by these beings to go back through that tunnel of light to return to where they came from. They didn't know that they were dead. They were given an option to go back to where mommy and daddy is, or to stay where they were. And all of them who said, no, I want to go back, they said, all right, then you got to go back through that tunnel of light, go to the end and jump. And that's what they did. And at that moment is when they were resuscitated and they came back to life again. And, one little girl, she was absolutely amazing.
This message comes from NPR.
She described perfectly that she actually met her grandmother in this room together with all these people in the white coats. And her grandmother said, no, you got to go back because mommy is missing you. You got to go back. You can't leave mommy alone. And when she went back and she woke up from the surgery, she was revived in the operating room. She eventually met her mother. She said to her mother, Mommy, I met Granny. And her mother said, how can you meet Granny? Granny died before you were born. And she described Granny. And the way she described this woman was exactly the way this woman's mother looked. She described her grandmother. And her grandmother said, go back to mommy. Mommy's missing you. And she'd never met this woman,
Oh, my gosh. Well, what was her mom's reaction?
Well, I mean, can you imagine? Shock.
I can't.
There are other stories that I tell in there. There were two women each one of them had a teenage son. And the one woman, each of them dreamt about the other woman's son in their dreams. And it was a very complex way that these two women were eventually put together again. And when they met, I photographed their meeting, their getting together. A psychic got them together because they heard, this guy heard about their stories. They were each dreaming about each other's son, and they had seen in their dreams the two boys together. So in other words, these two kids who had died, one in a motorcycle accident and the other one in an operating room from some ghastly illness or injury, had made friends in the spiritual realm and were having dreams, and these two mothers were dreaming the same dream. And we had cameras there when these two people met. It was just absolutely incredible. Then they compared photographs of their two boys together for the first time. And they said, oh, yeah, I've met him. That's your son. He came to me in my dream. That's exactly how he looked. Yeah, that's him. So there's no...
That is so bizarre.
It's not only about being in Western societies. I've come across this even in tribal societies and in rural societies. Because, when you deal with the tribal people in Africa, the whole concept of spirituality and religion is all based around the ancestors and your ability to communicate with the ancestors. Everything is about the ancestors. You get healed.
This message
you are given information. You are given good fortune. And it's always through the ancestors. And the medium that these people use, the shamans, the sangomas, are by throwing the bones, because the belief is that the ancestors influence the way these bones fall on the floor. And then these shamans, these sangomas, interpret the pattern as being events, because the ancestors, once again, are speaking to them, telling them stuff,
That is so bizarre.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But in the very best way.
Yeah, and and there's no arrogance about it. Some of these people are the sweetest people imaginable. They go sit at the foot of a wise older person and learn their craft over a period of years. And, they go away ordained into these crafts and into these arts. And, it's just amazing. They don't go to university. A lot of them, can't even read. And today, that version, that type of healing is officially recognized in South Africa as part of the medical system. That's how much respect it is given today.
My word, really?
Yeah, in the days of apartheid, of course, people who did that were regarded, that's just another witch doctor, absolutely disparaging and arrogant. Today, it's a different story entirely. They are respected for what they are, and it's about time they get that degree of respect because they're extraordinary people. I know, unfortunately. I know.
Homeopathic medicine is so important. I have been helped by it when I got tired of a health thing that wasn't getting better. And oh yes, April in chat says she was just going to say psychology blows this stuff off as crazy.
Yeah, of course.
Truly it does. Well, you can't interrupt Big Pharma and, all the other things.
That's right.
But what do you think out of all of the healings, and I know that we're going to get to yours in the second hour as well, but what do you think the percentage is of the people there who actually utilize that field of medicine now that it's available to them?
Among white society, very few, although it is increasing now that apartheid has gone and that South Africa is now an open, free, democratic society, which took place once Nelson Mandela was released from prison. It's now had 20 years of free of racism. It's gone by the way, South Africa is one of the most embracing and I think amazing constitutions in the world that protects the right of everybody. Enshrined in the Constitution of South Africa today is the right to choose your partner, and be you, whether you're gay or straight or whatever. It is enshrined in the Constitution. No other society on the planet has that. Many other societies in Africa, and certainly in countries like the Middle East and so on, if you're gay or you're lesbian or whatever, you're frowned upon. In South Africa, it is enshrined by right, by law. That is how enlightened that country has become after those many dark years of divisive racism that defined everything and the way people behaved. It's a complete turnabout, and it's so refreshing to go there. The problem is that there's a lot of crime in South Africa at the moment because unemployment is high, and the COVID has just made a mess of everything, as it has all over the world. And please, let's just get through this COVID pandemic, because we really need help with this. And I think we all need to start tapping into higher realms to help us to get through this dark period. In a way, maybe the pandemic came to teach us all a lesson. We've not been treating planet Earth very well. We've been very, very brutal to the planet that is our only home. We've been brutal to the environment, the way we've been poisoning the earth, the way we've been chopping rainforests down and burning them down, the way we've been exploiting the planet, the plastic in the oceans, the acidity levels. I mean, we've just been, and also a thing that is a pet project of mine is the way we've been treating wildlife and animals generally. Is just absolutely horrific. In factory farming and the industrialized side of agriculture. And I know I'm speaking just, you're in Alabama, so there's a lot of agriculture that goes on there, and and here in California too. People think, oh, California is all about the aerospace industry and Hollywood movies and music. It's not. The biggest part of the Californian economy is agriculture.
Yes.
So I know we're also an agricultural state over here. And the way animals are treated as part of the agricultural system is just appalling. The cruelty that goes on, the way we treat them, it's just shocking. And I think the day will come when we look back upon this period as being a very, very brutal, vicious one. And, we'll regret what we've done. And maybe this pandemic is part of learning that process. I don't know. I would like to think that is the case, because if you think about it, if the virus really did start in that awful so-called wet market in Wuhan in China, where they sell everything from, lizards to, whatever, all kinds of innocent animals. And some of these animals are killed in the most vicious and brutal ways. I think that we have to rethink the way we get on with our neighbors. And our neighbors aren't only human. They're other critters as well.
That's right.
We got to start respecting them.
Well, I totally agree with you, but we have to take our top of the hour break. And everyone who listens regularly knows that this is our news break, and I apologize. But, I am ever hopeful that we're going to have good news. I am just constantly on the watch for that. So let's see what we find here. We will be back after this, and I hope that
This message comes from NPR sponsor Geico. Do you own or rent your home? Fortunately, Geico makes it easy to bundle your home and car insurance. It's a good thing, too, because having a home is hard work. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. There's unprecedented security at state houses across the country ahead of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration later this week. But as NPR's Eric Westervelt reports, threatened pro-Trump demonstrations didn't materialize today in most capitals.
Small groups of pro-Trump protesters, some heavily armed, gathered Sunday outside state houses in Oregon, Michigan, Ohio, and South Carolina. Those gatherings were small, peaceful, and short-lived. Most state capitals were largely quiet Sunday, despite FBI warnings that white supremacists and anti-government extremists might target them. Many state house complexes posted a heavy presence of police and National Guard forces. At least 19 states deployed Guard troops after an insurrectionist mob overran the U.S. Capitol January 6th. The atmosphere remains tense ahead of Joe Biden's swearing in on Wednesday. Washington, D.C. remains under extraordinary security. Eric Westervelt, NPR News.
The Justice Department says it's arrested an elected official from New Mexico on charges related to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Coe Griffith, New Mexico County Commissioner and founder of a group called Cowboys for Trump, was arrested in Washington. Authorities say he vowed to travel to D.C. with weapons to protest the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Kremlin critic and opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been arrested at a Moscow airport. As NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports, Italy, France, and the incoming Biden administration are calling for his release.
In a statement on Twitter, Jake Sullivan, Biden's pick for national security advisor, called for Navalny's immediate release and said the perpetrators of the attack on his life must be held accountable. Navalny was returning from Berlin, where he had spent the last 5 months recuperating from being poisoned by what health authorities say is a variant of a Soviet-era nerve agent. Sullivan wrote, quote, "The Kremlin's attacks on Mr. Navalny are not just a violation of human rights, but an affront to the Russian people who want their voices heard. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said Navalny poses a threat to national security, but denies that he was poisoned." Barbara Sprunt, NPR News.
Health regulators in Brazil approved 2 COVID-19 vaccines for emergency use. NPR's Philip Reeves reports.
Brazil has 209,000 COVID deaths, a second wave, and a new strain of the virus. Yet its vaccination program has been delayed by political infighting and undermined by the president, Jair Bolsonaro, who says he won't be vaccinated. Bolsonaro's particularly scoffed at the vaccine Coronavac, pioneered by his political rival, the governor of Sao Paulo, in partnership with China. It's now been cleared for use. That means Coronavac will be going into Brazilian arms when vaccinations begin this week, because the government doesn't yet have any AstraZeneca, the other vaccine now approved by regulators.
You're listening to NPR News. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris plans to resign her Senate seat tomorrow, 2 days before she and President-elect Biden are sworn into office. That clears the way for California Governor Gavin Newsom to appoint Democrat Alex Padilla to serve the final 2 years of Harris's term. Padilla is currently California Secretary of State. He will be the first Latino senator from California, where around 40% of the population is Hispanic. The U.S. Census Bureau is asking some households around the country about whether they plan to get a COVID-19 vaccine. NPR's Hansi Wang reports the Bureau is trying to collect the information for a voluntary survey about how the pandemic is affecting people's daily lives.
If you get a text message or an email for a Census Bureau survey about the coronavirus, you may be asked, have you received a COVID-19 vaccine? Do you plan to receive all required doses? Those are some of the newest questions added to the Household Pulse survey. That national online survey has been tracking how the pandemic is affecting people's finances, mental health, and access to health care. Now the Bureau is trying to figure out why people may decide to get vaccinated or not. As the rollout of vaccines continues to ramp up, results from the survey will be released every 2 weeks starting late this month. Hansi Wang, NPR News, New York.
In Amsterdam, riot police used water cannons to disperse protesters who were taking part in banned demonstrations against the Dutch government over its tough coronavirus lockdown. Police say they took that action because the protesters weren't social distancing. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from Intercom, presenting this message. Customer support doesn't have to be chaotic. Intercom's resolution bot resolves 33% of support tickets automatically for happier customers and more efficient teams. Now we're talking. More at intercom.com/support.
Hello there. It is 5 minutes after the hour, and you are listening to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We are the online voice of Fate Magazine, and I am Kat Hobson, your host. Before I go any further in this, I have to give a shout-out to Charlene Cadden-Power in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Happy birthday to you. I am so happy to know you. And I hope your day has been worthy of a woman of your stature. So, love you. I am so enjoying this conversation. My guest tonight is Lionel Friedberg. He is, he's a little bit of everything. He is a writer, producer, director. He is an author. He has done all kinds of work. He's worked for Discovery and History. He has written a new book, Forever in My Veins, which is brilliant. I'm just going to tell you, and you can get it February 2nd. So I would be looking into that were I in your shoes. He is part of the reason, well, actually, the man who brought us television shows like Mysteries of the Bible, Histories, Mystery. I actually love History Mysteries. Discovery, History, National Geographic, A&E. I mean, everywhere. Discovery. And I am so thankful, Lionel, that you have joined me tonight. We started off a little rough, but it's just perfect now. And we have some things to get to. And we were going to talk about the lake, and you were going to continue. We were going to cover your health issue that was also prophesied to you. And where do you want to start?
Why don't we look at the lake story, because we've had this technical glitch at the beginning of the show tonight, and it sort of resonated with me because it reminded me of, technical glitches are nothing new. I've been a filmmaker for years, and technical glitches are always things that you have to deal with. So I felt for you at the beginning of the show where you were dealing with those that, came along to challenge you tonight. But you got through them and you fixed them and everything's back and everything's up and running, and that's great. So everything's fine and dandy now. But it reminded me of an event that happened in the 70s. I was doing a series of documentaries that looked at the cultures of some of the predominant tribal groups, if you like. Ethnic groups would be a more correct word to use. Ethnic groups in South Africa. South Africa has 11 official languages. That gives you an idea how many different tribes there are. And each one has their own language, but most people speak English, of course. But anyway, in the 70s, I was doing a series called The Tribal Identity, which looked at the main tribal groups. And it was absolutely fascinating because for the very, very first time, we could bring to white audiences, white viewers, a little bit of an insight into the cultures and traditions of their black neighbors and who these people really were and where they came from and what their practices were and what their belief systems were and their initiation rites, and of which there are many. Some of them are so colorful, and I describe a lot of them in the book for both males and females in the tribal areas. Mm-hmm. At the basis of all of these initiation rites, which take many, many forms, but at the bottom of it lies the essence of respect, how to respect your family, your parents, and your marital partner eventually, and how to be responsible citizens and responsible parents. All of this is taught to young folk in the bush in various ways. And I described some amazingly colorful ceremonies. I'm not sure whether they all still continue today, because that's nearly over 40 years ago, and things might have changed. But one of the things that we were doing, we were working with a tribe in the northern part of South Africa called the Venda, Venda. Now, they really are amazing people. They have an extraordinary history, and their culture is absolutely fascinating. Their music is marvelous, but their ritualistic beliefs and their religious beliefs are really quite something to experience. And once every 5 years, and I'm talking again back in the 70s, once every 5 years, there was the tradition that you would need to honor the great spirit of the tribe that lived in a sacred lake. And the name of this lake is Fundutsi. So once every 5 years, they have this big ceremony down at the lake where they pour offerings, usually homemade beer, made of essentially of cornmeal, ground cornmeal, which is allowed to ferment, and other vegetable products and leaves and whatever else that they pour into the lake as an offering to the Great Spirit, who supposedly has a sort of python form to either him, her, or it, whatever you wish to think of it. And once every 5 years, and one of the oldest members of the tribe officiates at the ceremony. And we were very fortunate to be able to film one of these. Now, my anthropologist, who was my host in the series, his name was Peter Becker, an amazing guy, who spoke a lot of the local black languages. He learnt them all, and he really knew his stuff. He was a terrific guy. He was my on-camera host for the series. And we were given permission to go down to the sacred lake with a group of people who all were dressed in their tribal dress, rattles and grass skirts, beads, colorful, amazing. And these people have very strong features. They really are wonderful, good-looking people, both male and female. And so we go down to the lake to do the ceremony. And the old priest who was going to officiate was a guy who was well over 100 years old. He was eventually brought in. And, we asked him questions. Of course, he spoke no English, but we had translators, and, we asked him many questions. And his answers proved that, he remembered things as a boy, as a child. Oh. And all of it showed us very clearly that, he was well over 100 years old. Anyway, this place is so sacred to that tribe that when you go down to the shores of this lake, which is down in the middle of a valley, which is really difficult to get to, steep banks and inclines, very difficult, lots of thorns and bushes and trees on the way. But when you get down to the bottom, you need to take your shoes off in the same way as you do in many Oriental cultures, out of respect for the spirits, because almost echoing the biblical command, like to Moses, take thy shoes off thy feet, for the land upon which thou walk is holy ground, said God to Moses. Well, the same thing applied to these people. When you get down to the bottom of the lake, you take your shoes off. You walk around barefoot out of respect. It's holy ground. And we did this. And anyway, Peter, my host, took his shoes off, of course, was walking around, and there were a lot of pebbles and stones and, thorns. And he stubbed his toe on one of the pebbles, and he hurt his toe, and he was sort of hobbling around. Now the ceremony has got underway at that point, and this ancient old man, this withered old guy, was looking out towards the lake with his hands held up high above his head, peering out over the lake, and he was chanting away in this voice, sort of wow, chanting to the spirit of the lake, thanking the ancestors and the creators of the tribe for protecting the tribe. And here's Peter in front of my camera with this going on in the background with all these people in their tribal dress and that remarkable old man. And Peter's hobbling around on one foot, saying, ouch, ouch. And one of my assistants started to giggle. And it was infectious. You know what happens when people start giggling.
Absolutely. But oh my gosh, what timing.
Spreads around the room instantly, right? So eventually
yes.
Everybody's howling with laughter. Well, that's what happened to us. We all we couldn't control ourselves. We started to laugh, to giggle and laugh. Now, that wasn't the way to behave at all. We are partaking in an ancient ceremony we should have had far more respect than that, but we couldn't help ourselves. We were all sort of trying to stifle our laughter and, sneering and giggling, and we're laughing. And this old man, he was half blind and half deaf. He couldn't possibly have heard us, but he stopped his chanting. He stopped looking out towards the lake with his hands up like this, and he turned around and looked at us. Those eyes, they couldn't see very much. They were that old. But he looked at us when we knew that he was watching us with some kind of real anger. And as that happened, and remember, this is the days of film and tape. We're running film and we're running tape decks recording all of this. The minute he turned around to look at us, the camera stopped running, the tape recorded, the Niagara professional tape deck stopped working. Everything electronic that we were using stopped dead, stopped working. And I looked at Peter, my anthropologist, and I said, what's going on? And Peter looked at me. We all stopped laughing at that point, of course, because this is serious stuff. We're missing the heart of the ceremony. We can't film it. Everything's jammed. Nothing's working. What's going on? So I called one of my assistants over. I said, for God's sake, please go and ask the head tribesman over there, the headman from the local village, to please go and speak to the priest and ask him whatever happened to please, whatever was done to undo it, if it was possible. And that was done. They ran away and they went down to this old guy and whispered into his ear and came running back to us and said, the priest said that the ancestors are unhappy about your behavior and you are not being allowed to photograph the ceremony.
Wow.
My assistant, we had a voltmeter there, of course, which you carry. Every good assistant has a camera. Does the battery work? Yeah, there's power. Is there power going through the cables? Yes, there's power. Is there power going to the tape deck? Yes, there's power. Everything had power, but nothing was running. Nothing was working. I mean, we all knew, and Peter said, the spirits are jamming us. They're not allowing us to shoot this. Something metaphysical, something in the supernatural world is stopping us from allowing us to do what we have to do down here. We were panic stations. So I said to the assistant again, I said, please take our apology, go back to the old man and apologize most profusely and ask him to apologize to the ancestors on our behalf. We really are very, very sorry. We're very apologetic for our behavior. Please forgive us for what we did. We didn't mean to offend anybody. And he went back to the old guy, and the old guy, sort of nodded his head, this very old man, and he sort of, wobbly, he turned around, looked back at the lake, lifted his arms to the lake again, and started to continue with his chanting. And as he did so, immediately the tape deck starts to run, the camera starts to run, everything starts to run.
Well, I guess he showed you. Oh, my goodness.
Go figure that out. So I don't know if that was your problem at the beginning of the show, but
I wasn't familiar with any spirits that were here.
And I don't see any reason why anybody should have been jamming you. But anyway, whatever did, you unjammed it. You got it right. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I use a specific microphone, but the connection cables for them are specific to that brand. You cannot use anything else. So when you commented before we started that you had heard a sound, I was like, well, I'm not hearing that. Well, while we were trying to get everything working, I did. And I never, ever have used like a gaming headset, with the little mic up made into it or whatever. And that's what I'm using tonight because I am on the road and this is not my home computer base. But thank goodness, and I don't know, well, I do know why, because I get things that happen like that and I always go, I don't know why that happened, but because I knew that it would. I had tossed this little gaming headset into my computer bag, the one that I travel with.
Well, you see, the spirits were helping you because
they were helping me.
They told you to do that.
When I was looking during the break, the prong that goes into the microphone is bent.
There you go.
So it must have happened during the travels. But actually, I was interviewed on Friday and I used it and it worked well. So I obviously did something to it, but didn't know it. So yeah,
these things happen.
They do.
Things happen.
We have to take this break. I'm sorry, but we were going to come back. We have other things that we want to talk about too. But yes, isn't that strange? But no, just no angry spirits here that I'm aware of. I'm going to try to keep it that way too. So we will be right back. Y'all come back too.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the world wide web of weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio with my guest, Lionel Friedberg, and I am having the best time with him. And now we have got questions going out the wazoo. And we have, a lot of them we have answered, but do you mind a couple of them?
Sure, go ahead.
Fantastic. What is your favorite country that you visited or lived in?
Well, I mean, I'm now 100% American. I'm now an American citizen, and I think of myself entirely as an American. But the essence of Africa and the mystery, the mystique, and the antiquity of Africa, and having grown up on that continent, remains with me for all time. I'm not sure if this applies to folks from other parts of the world. You know, people go from one part of the world to the other and, you know, may make new homes everywhere. We've been doing that for a long, long time. And, you know, but Africa really is my birthplace. That's where I come from. It's a continent that defined me. And some of the most extraordinary experiences that I've ever had in my life took place there. And the essence of that continent and its antiquity, its the ancient nature of Africa and its extraordinary versatility, variety, is what courses through my veins. And that's part of why I called my book Forever in My Veins.
Yes.
But there's a double meaning to that title, because what also lies in my veins is a quest to find the truth. You've got to keep searching. You've got to keep finding out. You've got to keep going from horizon to horizon. You never get to the end. It is a constant adventure. And the other thing is that what runs very, very deeply in my blood is the magic of film, because film was the means that took me into all of these unbelievable adventures that I've had in my life. So it refers to many things. But to answer your listener's question, I think what I found the most fascinating country that I visited was India, and particularly South India. I always wanted to go and visit the ancient temples of Hindu India. And my wife and I eventually went out there. She's been to other parts of India. She's been to North India, Central India. I think the whole of India must be absolutely fascinating. But I was always really drawn to South India. Maybe it has something to do with a past life. I think it might well have. But I'm very, very attracted to the culture and to the spiritual beliefs of the Hindu people, about being respectful to all forms of life. About just being humble, and about just the way you go about your world, the sort of things that you put on your plate. I like the concept of, if you can, be careful about what you eat. It defines who you are. There is the saying, you are what you eat, and I totally believe that. And so, I tend towards this whole concept of vegetarianism, because not only is it healthier, but I think it's good for one's karma. It's good for one's vibes. It just, they used to feed the Roman troops at night, steak, because it gives you vitality, and it makes, it gives you that kind of stamina. And the Hindus knew this. So I was anyway attracted very much to southern India, and I wanted to visit some of those really, really, really ancient temples that exist there. I've been to Egypt as well, and which was absolutely amazing. But India for me was like someone had taken a huge palette of paint and turned it upside down and spilt all of these colors, this variety of colors, onto a huge canvas. Because that's what India really is all about. It's this incredibly eclectic, colorful mix of everything imaginable. In one day, you can see the entire spectrum of life, from birth to death, from poverty to extreme wealth, from beauty to unbelievable ugliness. And I love the music, and I love their culture. I think that the dance and that the music of southern India has within it and something that really resonates with me very, very deeply. I love the sound of gongs and bells and silence, the smell of incense, the fact that people go into a humble home where they don't have very much, but there is always a little lamp burning to show that there is light in the world. I love all that stuff. And India,
love that.
And that's what India for me was all about. In one day, you see it all. It is an amazing place. And the people are just fabulous. They're absolutely wonderful folks. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the country. I'm quite sure it must be very much like the South. But I had the time of my life. We were there for over a month. We rented a car, my wife and I, and we drove everywhere. And part of the journey was broken up where we took a train. I always wanted to experience an Indian train. And I've heard all these horror stories about going by rail in India. Well, I wanted to experience that, the crowds, the chaos. And It was amazing. It was just wonderful. I loved every minute of it. So the journey was broken up by this wonderful rail journey. And then we had another car, a different driver. And, every day the driver would go out and pick some flowers and buy a fruit, a lemon or a lime or some whatever local fruit, and tie it to the grill of the car or to the rear view mirror, because that would bring freshness, that would bring energy, that would bring the essence of nature into the car. I love that kind of concept. It was just marvelous. I love that place.
Well, it's a beautiful description, because now I want to go. So, and I actually have some Buddhist priests that I'm familiar with, I haven't seen them in a little while, who came out of Tibet and ran to India. And one of them is now here teaching Buddhist cultures at a university.
Uh-huh.
And he has found a way to educate people and lead them, help lead them toward enlightenment. And I just think that's wonderful. But we have a couple of other questions, and this is going to take us into one that I was actually going to save for last, but we have a question about it.
Yeah.
So she says that many people call those ancient societies' creation stories myths or mythm. And do you believe they're myth, or that there might be some truth to those stories and strange creatures?
The creation stories?
Mm-hmm.
Are we referring to biblical stories, or what is she referring to?
Well, I am pretty sure that she studies everything, but I believe that this would be referencing biblical stories. Am I right?
Yeah.
Because she's a quick typist when she's
Yeah.
at the keyboard. But I would assume so. You know what happens when you assume.
Yeah.
But,
well, let me try and look at it this way. I wrote the show, Who Wrote the Bible, because I was supervising producer of a series of shows which ran for 4 seasons. I was on the series Who Wrote the Bible. We told lots of biblical stories from the Old Testament and the New Testament. One day we were having a story conference at the production company here in LA and on the line to the network in Washington. We were just talking about new stories to develop for the series. And I said, we've done all these amazing stories. Why don't we do a show that looks at the Bible itself? Who wrote it? Yes, everybody, let's do that. Let's do one called Who Wrote the Bible? Who's going to write it? Which one of your writers do you want to do that? And I said, I'd like to do it myself. So it was agreed that I would go off and write that show myself. And I went away, and after, it didn't take long for me to realize that there was no way that I could do justice to a subject like that in 1 hour. And I went back to the studio, who went back to the network, and and we said, oh, look, an hour isn't going to cut it, not on this subject. We need more. Is there any way we can get a 2-hour special to do this? And the network sort of hummed and hawed, and and by the way, the producers were really angry with me because I was breaking the rules. You don't do that. But they requested it from the network, and the network eventually came back with the answer where they were really understanding and very kind, and they said, sure, okay, let's do that as a special, as a 2-hour special. Go and do it. So off I go, and, well, would you believe, it didn't take me long to realize that even 2 hours was not going to get me close to even scratching the surface of that story. And I went back to the studio, and I thought that I was going to get fired. I really did. They looked at me and they said, "Oh no, not again." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Can we get another hour out of this?" And the executive, I thought he was going to throttle me, and he said, "Well, let me check it out with the network," which he did. And would you believe the network agreed? And so they agreed to do it as a Sunday afternoon special, a 3-hour special called Who Wrote the Bible. And so I went away and I wrote this show, and it was a really, very tough job to do because there's no way that one can really do justice to a subject as enormous as that. How many books are there in the Bible? 48 or whatever it is. It's incredible. And, where did they all come from, and who wrote what and when and where? When you get to the New Testament, there's almost a paper trail that you can kind of follow. The Gospels, you can sort of follow it. The Old Testament gets a little more difficult because where are the records? Who kept what? Where do they come from? But when you get to the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy,
the Torah, yeah,
those are tough to do because there really there's no evidence. There's nothing that you can go to as your source material other than what we have. And of course, when one looks at the Bible, you've got to realize that it's been translated so many times over so many centuries. And it all began originally as Hebrew and was then translated into Aramaic, and it then became Greek, and then it became Latin, and then it became Old English, and then it became this kind of English, and now you've got modern English. How much do you lose on the way through all these translations? Well, you lose a lot. And not only that, but there were many books of the Bible that were removed once it was finally decided which books finally went into the Bible at the Council of Nicaea. And a lot of books were thrown out, like the book of Enoch.
Yes.
And, I tell you, for folks who are interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials and aliens and whatever else, the book of Enoch is full of stories that are straight up their alley,
Absolutely. It's what started Eric von Däniken on his path.
Yeah, I mean, it's about intergalactic warfare. It's about, wars between species from different planets. You go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, that amazing temple in the jungle.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And that's where we get the whole idea of vimanas, these flying craft that are part of all of those stories that are carved into the walls of this amazing temple. So it's difficult. It's hard to know what to make of all of this. But isn't it interesting that when you read Genesis, and maybe this answers your listener's question to some extent, at the very beginning it says, at the beginning, after creation, there were giants in the land.
Yes.
And the sons of the gods, took the wives of men, And so what are we talking about here? Are we talking about mythological beings, or are we talking about something else? Now, a lot of people who believe that we've been visited many, many times by alien species, and I'm one of them, but I'm not going to go there because without prefacing it with a lot of other stuff, because this is sensitive stuff. But I certainly believe that, we're not alone in the universe, and we've been visited by extraterrestrials for a long, long time. And who knows, maybe there has been some bioengineering going on. At least Zachariah Sitchin writes extensively about that in his books, about the Anunnaki. But that's just another one of the many, many examples that one can look at. So, and also there are discrepancies in Genesis. In one part it says Noah takes into the ark the animals 2 by 2, and not very far away, just a few pages away, there's another passage that says Noah was told to take into the ark animals 7 by 7. So not only are we seeing some contradictions going on, but you can see a different style of writing going on. And serious biblical scholars can identify the work of 3 different authors in the book of Genesis. And I don't mean to denigrate the Bible. That's the last of my intentions. I think the most important thing, by the way, about the Bible is not about where it came from and who wrote it and all that stuff, but who reads it and what is the purpose of reading it. And if the Bible teaches one humility, and if the Bible teaches one to be decent to your neighbor and to love your neighbor, and to be tolerant of others, and to be respectful. That's really what it's all about. And to be respectful of the fact that we are not alone and that there is something above us. Think of it whatever you like. I don't think it's an old guy sitting on a cloud looking down at us, but there certainly is a super intelligence that is behind everything. And the Bible makes you respect that fact. For those who believe that, Jesus was the Son of God, that's fine, and it's wonderful, and I totally respect that. And it has created one of the most amazing religions on earth, and I totally respect all of that. But I think we really need to look deeper into all of these things. And not only that, but when you look at ancient texts, like from Sumeria, that part of the world, which is where Babylon eventually was established, that sort of area which is now Iraq and so on.
Yes.
That is an amazing part of the world. And those old texts, many of them on clay tablets, and these other documents that are kept in museums like in Berlin, and some were kept in Baghdad, and a few in Paris, and there are a few in the British Museum. They talk about legends. There's a story there called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is
Yes.
exactly like the story of Noah and the ark.
Yes.
So which came first? Who was borrowing from who? And what's the real truth? Or is it all true? And what do we take from it? Well, as far as I'm concerned, what I take from it is just keep looking and investigating and digging deeper until you find the truth. But in the meantime, respect what's out there and respect what exists and respect the fact that other people have their belief systems and you've got to respect that.
Yes.
And that has been a guiding principle of mine all my life.
Well, it's all about balance. You know,
Yeah.
everybody's ideas count the same.
Precisely.
And everybody gets their turn to share their ideas.
Of course.
So I agree with you. I think that's a good philosophy to live by. We have more questions. Something about reptilians. Let me find it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you know about Credo Mutwa, who just passed away recently?
Of course, absolutely. Credo Mutwa was probably one of the most famous, internationally known sangomas in South Africa. Yes, he was unfortunately grossly overweight towards the end of his life, and he suffered from diabetes really badly towards the end of his life, and he died not very long ago, I think about a year ago. But Credo Mutwa has written extensively about Zulu legends and Zulu history. His first book was called Indaba, My Children. Indaba is a Zulu word that means let's meet, having a meeting, let's get together and talk about stuff. So his first book was called Indaba, My Children. And if anyone's interested in any of that really ancient African stuff, try and find a copy of Indaba, My Children by Credo Mutwa. It's like 1,000 pages. This guy wrote that. He's written many other books as well, but he was an extraordinary man. I never had the opportunity of meeting him, but everyone knew who Credo Mutwa was.
Well, that's interesting because Dreamland in chat said that he was the leader who told of the reptilians who visited them in the far past.
Yes, he did talk about that. Yeah. And, Credo Mutwa also tells another really interesting story. If you're a little guy growing up in the boondocks in South Africa, invariably what these little guys would do were to become shepherds, looking after the either the sheep or the goats or the cattle. That's what they would do. Little boys would do that, out in the tribal areas. And Credo Mutwa was a little shepherd, I think he was, or a herdsboy, looking after his father's cattle. Up in the northern area of South Africa somewhere, which is where I think he grew up, although he really was essentially from the Zulu clan. And a very proud one at that. And by the way, the Zulu people are an amazing people with an amazing history. They had an empire. They had a leader by the name of Shaka who ruled huge tracts of territory in Africa because they were so powerful. He was like the African version of Roman legions and the Roman armies during his time. We're talking about a couple of hundred years ago. But I'm digressing. So Credo Mutwa, when he was a little boy, one day he talks about this. And I think there is an interview with David Icke, I-C-K-E, folks who follow him, where he was being interviewed. And he said that he came across a UFO and a spacecraft that was there in the bush, and that he was abducted. The term he used was, I think he used the term invited and not abducted, inside the spacecraft, and that he was examined by these beings. They were almost human-like in many ways. They could have been greys, they could have been white, so they could have been one of many others that people, are familiar with, those who follow, the UFO culture. And he said they examined him, and he spent, he wasn't sure how long it was, but he spent quite a long time inside this craft. And eventually he was released. He was unharmed. And he said after that, he started developing all these intuitive powers. And he had great insight into the tribe and into the history of his people as a result, he said, of that experience. And he is of the opinion that the reptilians are only one of many, many alien species who have visited the Earth, and that the reptilians may be one of the baddies. There are lots of different, and I tend to agree with this whole thinking, that there are many different species that have been visiting the Earth over a period of perhaps millions of years. And the reptilians are perhaps not the nicest ones. And
I
they
would
may
agree
still,
with from what I've heard.
and they may still be around. And, I mean, I've even heard tales about reptilians are shapeshifters, and they even take the form of humans. Do I have proof of that? No, I do not. But I certainly will listen to all of this stuff. I love going to UFO conferences, by the way.
I do
and
too.
love going. There's an event that happens once every year near Palm Springs called Contact in the Desert.
Yes, I was there the last one they held.
For anybody who's into any of this alternative stuff, that's the place to go.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely wonderful. How long is it, Kat? 4 or 5 days, right?
Yes.
And
well, it's 3 days total, but I mean, as far as the speakers and lectures, 4 days.
Yeah.
But
you go there
it's wonderful.
and you hear all these amazing people who come from all over the world, the Graham Hancocks of the world, the Erich van Daniken's of the world.
That's where I met him.
And lots of others. They come there and they talk about these things and they explore these things. And I think it's very important that people do have the opportunity of looking into all this stuff. Because I really do think it's time to rewrite the history of the human race. And I really think it's time to rewrite the history of the world as we know it. And Contact in the Desert is one of the places where you get a lot of material that makes you think about stuff.
And you can talk to people who have actually had their own experiences. But we have to take our last break.
Sure.
Because we ran over a little bit, but that's because I'm going to let this run over a little bit so that we can finish getting everything that we want out. So, we'll be right back. Y'all come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope.
That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the World Wide Web of Weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the final segment of Fate Mag Radio, the online voice of Fate Magazine. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am having the best time tonight learning and chatting with my guest, Lionel Friedberg. We had kind of segued into the alien conversation, and we had mentioned how fabulous Contact in the Desert is for learning about these things, and it is now held in a resort not at Joshua Tree itself, so no scorpions, so you can wear open-toed shoes, as I was told by one of the speaker's wives, and I took it to heart. So now that we have kind of broken the seal, as it were, on this topic, you had UFO experiences yourself. So do you want to talk about those? About
I
that?
did. I had immigrated to Canada. I was living in Canada. The year was 1966, and we were working on a documentary on the history of housing throughout Canada. Now, as most folks know, most of the population in Canada live way down in the south, just above the U.S. border. That's where most of the cities are. The urban areas are strung across Canada like that. And then you have this huge territory to the north, which is not very highly populated.
Right.
And what this documentary was about was how housing areas or towns and cities, the reason why they are formed and why they grow. That was the subject matter of this particular documentary we were working on. And we were in the province of Saskatchewan, and we were going to film at a potash plant. Now, potash is mined in Saskatchewan. I think, if I remember correctly, and I don't want to sound, though I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think potash is used in either fertilizer products and so on. It's a white material that is mined out of the ground, and when they mine it, it's in an open cast sort of mine, and it makes huge plumes of white dust and smoke. So we were going to film at this plant because the plant was the reason why a town was forming on the perimeter of the mine here in the middle of Saskatchewan. It was a very small crew, only 3 of us on that little show. And so we stayed at a motel that night, and Saskatchewan is really flat, absolutely like a draft board, tabletop, flat.
Oh, wow.
Cornfields, no mountains, no valleys. It's like flat. You can drive for miles, and you don't even find a bump in the road. Amazing, from horizon to horizon. So we left our motel early this particular morning, driving towards this potash plant, and of course we could see the plant way up ahead of us, at the horizon, because there was this plume of dust, white dust, going up from the ground and then hanging in the air, like just sitting up in the air like a big, almost like a mushroom cloud, if you like. And after a couple of hours of driving, we eventually get to the plant, and when we got to the gate, the guard at the gate says, "You guys get down to that parking lot, and take a look up, because there's something sitting up in that white cloud up there." And, I wasn't directing the show. The director said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we don't know what it is, but there's something up in that white cloud." "Oh, really? Oh, okay." So we go down, we stop in the parking lot. The director had to get on with the business of the day, which was meeting the manager of the plant to discuss the filming. But I set up the camera in the parking lot, and a couple of the other guys who worked at the plant came over to me, just shooting the breeze, smoking away, and, chatting with me. And I set up the camera with the longest or the most powerful lens that we had. And I think the longest lens that we had was something like a 300 millimeter, which was quite powerful. And again, it's film, and this was 16 millimeter film, not 35 millimeter, like we used to shoot, not on the Hollywood stages. This is 16 mil, and a 300 millimeter lens is pretty powerful. And I put that on the camera, and I looked up at the cloud, and just out of curiosity to see if I could see anything. And there was no wind that day, nothing, and we just sat around chatting. And then a little breeze came up, and this dust sort of began to clear up in the air. And my goodness, up there was a hint of metal, which was clear. You could see that.
Wow.
And one of the guys said to me, "There it is, there it is, there it is." And I sort of, trained the lens on it, managed to get some focus going, and turned on the camera. And then the breeze intensified a little bit, and that cloud cleared enough for me to see what was a large silver-like disc just sitting there. Underneath it was was what looked like a triangle, and with 3 beams, like a tripod, connecting that to the disc. Strange.
Oh my gosh, I have never heard of a craft like that.
A strange, very strange device. Now, people have often asked, well, how big was it? It was big. These were before the days of the big twin-aisle jumbo jets like the Boeing 747, but it probably was the size of that kind of aircraft. It was huge, sitting up there, not making a sound, just sitting there. Not a window to be seen, not a sign on it, nothing. Just a silver sheen. And I ran film. I must have run about 150 feet of film. That's a lot. And at the end of it, I turned off the camera. Nothing was happening, so I turned off the camera. And then the breeze came, and eventually this craft got covered up again by the white cloud. And that was it. I took the lens off, and we got on with the business of the day, which was filming at the plant. And at the end of the day, we go back to the motel, and it was my job to can up the film, to get the film out of the magazine, out of the camera, put each roll of film into a separate can, identified with a label, put a list on it, what we used to call a camera sheet, and send that back to Montreal for processing in the lab, and to await our return, which was some weeks later. And, a few weeks later, we eventually get back to Montreal, and one particular day was the day to go and look at all this footage that we'd shot across the country. A lot of boring footage about boring towns, but that's what the film was about. Just towns growing up and existing out there in the middle of nowhere, and cities and whatever else. Nothing really exciting. And at the end of sitting through a couple of hours more, I would say half a day of looking at all of these dailies, the projectionist in the back said, "What about this other roll here? This short one? Do you want me to put that on the projector as well?" And the head of the camera department said, looked at me, or looked at the director, said, "What is it?" And the director said, "I don't know what that is." And I said, "That's the footage of that thing we saw in the cloud." "Oh, yeah. So the projectionist put it on and ran it, and we saw it on the screen, and it was as clear as a bell. There was this object. Now, I have to tell folks that, I don't know how many if people are familiar with the old days of using film. You either shot film, which was a negative in the camera, and then when you got your negative, you either took it into a darkroom or a lab, and then you printed that onto positive stock. So you got a negative, which is your camera original, and then you got a positive print from that. Or Kodak made a wonderful type of film called a reversal film, which was, I think the term was Kodachrome.
Oh,
when you processed the film, what came out of the lab was you could look at it. It was in its positive form already. You didn't have to print it. It was positive. It was already viewable, and that's how we used to shoot slides for slide projectors and things like that. So the problem is with using that kind of film stock, and this was our downfall as to do with this particular event, is because we only had the positive print, if you like, the camera original, which was viewable, of this object. And we decided, the head of the camera department, I think it was, or somebody in the audience said, "Why don't we send that down to the States to Project Blue Book? They're doing research into stuff like this. Maybe they can identify it." And it was agreed that we would send it. And I know it was sent by some kind of courier service. I don't remember. I'm talking about, a million years ago. It's 1966, remember?
Right.
That the woman who ran the camera department, she was responsible for sending it off to Ohio. I think it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it was signed for. They did receive the film. And we didn't hear back. And, some more weeks went by, other projects go by, and eventually I went back one day to the camera department, and I said to her, Frankie, her name was Frankie Johnson, I said to her, "Frankie, did we ever hear back from those guys in the States about that footage of that strange thing that was in that cloud?" "Oh no, I don't think we'd heard back," she said. And I said, "Well, can we find out?" She said, "Yeah, I'll call them. I've got their number." And she looked at the time zone difference, and she said, "I can call them now." And she calls, and to her shock and dismay, she puts the phone down and she said, "They deny receiving it. They deny even knowing anything about the film. It's as though they didn't receive it, but we know that they signed for it because we have proof that it was received by them."
Right.
And now that they're in denial that they even got the footage. So you hear so many stories about there being cover-ups about that kind of stuff. And this was a typical example of them denying, them being whoever the authorities were, that these things didn't exist. Well, that craft did exist because we filmed it.
Right.
And they denied having any film of it at all. So, one wonders how much of the stuff that has happened over the years has been hidden from public knowledge. It was only recently I don't know if folks remember this, but recently there was some footage that was released to the networks by the Navy off the coast of San Diego from the USS Nimitz. There were two F-16s doing an aerial exercise over the Pacific, and they saw this UFO, and they filmed it. There's actual film that they have, not film, it's video. And it was released to the networks. It was on YouTube. It was on the television network. It was on the news. And this was not very long ago. This was maybe 6 months ago. The fact that that kind of stuff is now being released to the mass media may be an indication that maybe disclosure one day is not too far away. Maybe somebody somewhere is going to say, listen, we have to tell folks what's really been going on. Maybe we have been visited by alien craft for a long, long time. And maybe there are even bodies that can, everyone knows the story of Roswell. And that everyone knows that, bodies were found. But of course, the Air Force and so on covered it up by saying, oh, no, it was a weather balloon. No, there were no bodies, da-da-da-da. Well, is that the truth or not? And maybe the time is coming close now where we will be told the truth. I would hope so.
I hope so, because, the whole thing was that up until somebody panicked, they were very upfront and honest. We have a UFO. We have a flying disc.
Right.
For 12 hours.
Right.
The next morning, all of a sudden, it had devolved into a weather balloon.
Well,
just aluminum foil, basically.
You said earlier that you met the guy from the name of the movie was Fire in the Sky. What was his name?
Travis.
Travis Walton. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, Travis Walton, his experience, he's absolutely, I don't doubt for 1 second what this guy says. I've met him too. And, he talks about, and these beings that he encountered inside the spacecraft, I think this was in Arizona, wasn't it? Yeah, Arizona. Mm-hmm. Were not in any way belligerent. They obviously didn't mean him any harm. He was zapped by some kind of a ray that came out of this flying machine. And when he woke up, he was inside the craft.
Yeah.
And these beings were bending over him. And he said they meant no harm. I think they were trying to heal me, to help me, because I probably had a heart attack from this ray, this beam, whatever it is, that zapped me.
Yes.
And I believe that they were trying to, to fix me. And then I was released. The movie that was made about that fire in the sky told it from the opposite point of view, that they were hostile and, he was terrified and on and on. Maybe these beings really don't mean us any harm. And I think it's time that we, put out the welcome card and get to know them and tell folks what's going on.
Well, I think so, too. What I found interesting when, talking with Travis about that is that he's a very quiet man.
Yes,
as a rule.
Yes.
But, he felt like he had died. He felt like they had killed him, and that
right.
They didn't kill him, but the wash from their craft did. Yeah. And that they took him aboard simply to save him because his friends were in the truck.
That's right.
Where, if Travis could see them, I'm sure that the beings were aware of them as well. They didn't take them.
No, of course.
And but he said that when he woke up, that he was aggressive toward them, and they left rather than upset him more.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, and then came back presenting as more human, looking like Nordics. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
But I have one last question in here for you that I want to get to, because this is the person that I had told that you were interested in biblical and ancient texts and such. Mm-hmm. But have you heard any prophecy for the coming years about anything?
Yeah, I hear all sorts of stories about lots of things, as I'm sure most folks do. Anybody who's interested in alternative stuff, who go outside the box, as I do all the time. You hear a lot of things, and I'm hearing 2023 is a significant year, and that's, the end of times is nigh, and it's only 2 years away. I will listen to all of these so-called prophecies. I will listen to everybody's theories. I will not take any of them seriously unless I am absolutely satisfied that there is enough proof to satisfy me that it's not just hearsay or based on empty whatever it is that they're basing these prophecies on. So I will listen to a lot of them. But, do I think that we are now on the verge of the end of times, that the end of the world is near? No, I do not.
I do not.
And in fact, I think that we're probably at the beginning of a time of enlightenment, but we have to go through some degree of darkness in order to enlighten us. And maybe that's what the COVID pandemic is all about, is to push us towards the light. I think darkness is one of the forces of the universe that exists to push us towards the light, to push us towards becoming enlightened beings, to push us towards becoming more peaceful beings. And the only way to do that is to be pushed in that direction. That's the purpose of darkness. That's the purpose of even evil, if you like. It's there not to destroy, but to push us towards an enlightened place or phase or era. And who knows when that is going to be. But let's be open to listen to all their theories, and let's be open to listen to everybody's point of view. I don't dismiss them outright, and I certainly wouldn't be rude enough to say you're talking a lot of bunkum and junk and don't tell me this kind of stuff. I will listen to folks, but I don't swallow it all. I'm not gullible enough to believe unless there's some degree of proof.
As you should be. I mean, as you should not be gullible enough. Right. I am, that came out completely backwards, but I am so interested in all of your work and all of your experiences. We could go on for hours and hours, and I really look forward to hosting you on Paranormal Experienced in the near future. But when you say that that darkness's purpose is to lead us forward, and you had spoke about your interview with Hitler's pilot, do you feel that Hitler served that purpose as well?
No, it was that's an extent. That kind of darkness doesn't do that to you. But what it does do to the victim is to push the victim to realize that there isn't only, I think it's about, there isn't only bad stuff in the world, that there's hope, that there's light at the end of the tunnel, that even though mass murder takes place, and all we have to do is look at the world headlines at any time, look at any African country or a lot of countries in the Middle East, these dreadful wars that go on, and, look at what's going on in Afghanistan. Are these wars and is this violence teaching us anything other than the fact that peace is so essential that even though it may seem very, very obscure, I think no matter how dark and how awful and how terrible things may be, there is a lesson to be learnt in all of that. And somehow or another, even though we are the victims, I lost my grandparents, by the way. My father's mother was a victim of Hitler,
Oh my!
Died in the Holocaust, and so did his family. Does that make me anti-German? Absolutely not. So maybe there's a lesson in that. You learn not to be judgmental, and no matter how horrible these things are, there is a lesson in everything that we encounter in life and in the world. And the journey, is more about discovery than it is about revenge and being fearful and, allowing the darkness to take control of your life.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry about your family. But that was the story of so many. That's why I have no interest in ever going to Auschwitz or anywhere else of its kind, because I have a friend who is a psychic who went there and, he had to be carried out on a stretcher. He couldn't cope with it.
Yeah,
because it was so overwhelming.
I know the feeling well. I went to the killing fields in Cambodia, about
Yes.
during the Khmer Rouge, during Pol Pot's regime. in Cambodia, the killing fields. My wife and I were in Cambodia, and we went to the killing fields, and you walk around, and it's a very, very, very peaceful place. And there is a mountain of skulls in a glass building that extends, I don't know how many stories high, of thousands of skulls of people who were put to death at that very spot. And today, all you hear is birds, and there are butterflies fluttering around from flower to flower. And the leaves and the grass is green, and there's shade, and there are lovely trees, But children had their heads smashed open on this. There's one tree there that is put aside, where people come and they actually hang little trinkets on it as a remembrance, where children had their brains bashed out by the perpetrators of this awful regime. And you come away from a place like that and you really feel as though you are drained, as though you have been polluted by darkness, by badness, by evil, by energy that is, you just want to get rid of it. You want to take a shower and get rid of it. And it's true. It can affect you easily. And I don't know, I in my book, I talk about an illness that I developed and how the sangomas helped me to overcome that illness. In fact, I was even given an exorcism in a little country called Swaziland in South Africa, where a sangoma actually regurgitated, vomited after he smelt my kidneys. He didn't know that I had a kidney disease. He smelt me on the side of my body, and he vomited into a barrel. And I was told later that he had taken all the dark energy out and got rid of it for me, Wow. I mean, so darkness and energy and badness is a reality, but it can affect you, and people must be very careful, particularly when you go to places like that. It can really have an impact on you.
Well, I'm a believer in that. I agree. But it's so odd it's like when you visit the battlefields through here from the Civil War.
Right.
They're forested, the actual killing fields there are still clear.
Absolutely.
Where they actually came into hand-to-hand combat and such. But the rest is grown up, and it's beautiful. I've investigated a couple of them, and one of them, my husband, who is, as sensitive as a rock when it comes to that type of thing, and never helps me investigate, said, why don't I get one of your recorders and come here so that you can triangulate this, and maybe you'll pick up exactly where the sound is.
Right.
Because he was feeling it too, and he wanted to get answers. So it is very bizarre, because some of the places that have seen the most horrific things that humans can do to other humans are now calm and beautiful, but the energy is still there.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Excuse me, that can take a good empath down. Take a good psychic down. And
for sure.
Because it's just, that part doesn't go away. That part doesn't mellow and become beautiful.
Well, everything leaves an imprint. Every single thing leaves an imprint.
It's energy.
Whether it's good or bad. Absolutely. Energy is as real as this desk I'm sitting at right now. It exists, and I did work at Princeton University with a guy called Robert John, who wanted to find out, what is consciousness? What is it? Does it have? Can you move objects with your mind only, and things of that nature? And they proved time and time again that even consciousness, even thought, has energy to it, and
yes, it does.
Actually can have a physical impact on things, and it does, and it leaves an imprint. People go into a house and say, "Oh, I don't like this room." Yeah, well, maybe something bad happened there.
There's a reason for that.
The imprint is there.
Absolutely. And, to me, that's just fascinating. And
it is.
We have gone so far over the time for you. If you had plans, I know you need to go. So,
well, thank you for having me so long. That's great. No, I've enjoyed it very much. Kat, thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Well, I wasn't trying to ring you off, but I didn't know if you had plans for dinner, because you are so far behind me in time there. And I was just ruining your whole night. But thank you so much. I have enjoyed this conversation. I knew I was going to. And I just appreciate you. I appreciate your time and your sharing of your experiences, taking the questions. I appreciate you.
Likewise, I thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to be on your show, and I do hope folks get a chance to read the book, because I think they'll all get something out of it. You might just want to remind them it's forever in my veins, and my philosophy and everything that I've been talking about, it's all in there.
Yes.
I think people can get some benefit out of that. There's so much more to the world as we know than we can ever imagine, and let's just move forward.
Well, absolutely. You cannot stay stagnant, and you can't go backwards.
No.
No matter the situation, you have to keep plodding along, and things tend to settle where they're supposed to be.
Exactly.
So, and you are getting all kinds of kudos from chat, so thank you.
Thank you, and please thank on my behalf. People are still listening. Thank you, folks, for listening to me. I do appreciate, and I appreciate all your input, your questions, and the fact that you spent this time with Kat and I. I've enjoyed being with you all. Thank you.
And we will catch up again.
Okay, I look forward to that.
Me too.
All right, you take care. You take care and stay safe, huh?
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
All right.
Bye now.
Goodbye. For everyone who is listening, whether you're live or through our multiple outlets for archive, I would like to know if you have experiences yourself that you would like to share, if you have anything similar to share as well. And y'all are the reason that we do these shows. I am very blessed to have this platform. I am very blessed to have the listeners that I do. And I know that every one of y'all support everything we do here at the network. I just want to make sure that tomorrow is going to be a big day. Tuesday is going to be a big day. Every day is a big day in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But if you don't like what you see, you can change that. Be the spouse that you would like to have. Be the friend you'd like to have, or the parent. And make sure when you're out and about that you are putting off positive energy. It's so easy to get taken down by somebody else's negative, and you're worth so much more than that. So just make sure that that you value yourself and that you put out what you want to see. We can change this world. I have a shirt that says it, and my good friend Corey wrote a song about it. So we can be the change. Take care. Thank you again. Find your peace place and just carry it with you. And pray for our country and for society as a whole. We are pretty good people. We need to be reminded of that sometimes. Thanks again. See you next week. Same cat time, same cat channel. Good night.